Hey, everybody, it is Trags, and this week on Red Sox Beat, I welcome back an old friend. As a matter of fact, the gentleman who used to host this very podcast. He's covering the Red Sox for Mass Live. That would be the one and only Chris Cotillo. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Cotillo, all one word, ChrisCotillo. Welcome back to the podcast you used to host, Chris. How you doing?
I'm good, Trags. Thanks so much for having me. It's good to be back. I'm glad I think it was Josh hosted in between us, but glad the baton keeps getting passed.
Yeah, and certainly there is a lot to catch up on this second day of August as we record this. Obviously, the trade deadline came and went last Friday afternoon, not July 31st, but July 30th at 4 p.m. And yes, the Red Sox made several moves, but the biggest question is, will it be enough? They did not get Anthony Rizzo. He went to the hated Yankees. They had to settle for Kyle Schwarber. And the big catch in this, as you know, Chris, is that Kyle Schwarber is not ready to go right out of the gate. He suffered a right hamstring strain, went on the DL back on July 3rd, and he and Chris Sale could be rejoining the team soon. From what you hear and what you see, what is the latest on those two?
It seems like Schwarber is going to be going on a rehab stints at some point soon. I don't think they've given an exact date just because they wanted to kind of get him acclimated. He spent the weekend with the team in St. Pete. At this point, I'm not sure if he's going to go to Detroit with the team or if he's going to maybe come up to Worcester and start rehabbing, but he should be back, maybe within 10 days, 2 weeks. So, they're on the road for a while. So that gives them some time to, get these guys ready before the next homestand. And Chris Sale, after pitching the other day in Worcester, he'll have at least one more rehab start, and then he could be good to go. They haven't said that for sure yet, but I think, if you look at it, the tea leaves, reading those, it seems like he could be back during that homestand, either pitching something like August 12th against the Rays or over the weekend against the Orioles. So his return is imminent, obviously, as well. And, you talk about those two guys, and, the Red Sox have a lot riding on those two guys. Schwarber, their big trade deadline addition, when all their competitors in the AL East went out and got some really good players, and Sale, they obviously didn't go out and get a starting pitcher, and they ended up getting only a couple, depth relievers, nobody flashy in the back of the bullpen. So, their big pitching addition in the second half of the season is obviously Chris Sale. They're counting on a lot from him, and all indications are that it'll be pretty soon that he will be rejoining the Red Sox.
On Saturday in Worcester, as you mentioned, against Buffalo, Sale went 5 innings, 5 hits, 1 run it was earned, 1 walk, and 7 strikeouts. He touched 96 again on the radar gun. It looks as though his arm strength is there, right, Chris? I mean, this was his 4th appearance in rehab, but his first at AAA. He had pitched in the Florida State League, twice with AA Portland, and obviously Saturday with Worcester. I think all signs are pointing towards him being healthy and ready to go as soon as they throw him into the mix. And he's an intense competitor, right? We all know that. We saw that back in 2018. I think he's going to put the pedal to the metal and let her rip.
Yeah, and you know what? He's been itching to get back. He's been saying since May or June, if they let me start tomorrow, I would do that. But obviously they're taking a more careful approach. They're, taking him along slowly. And if you look around the league, you can see why. The Yankees had Luis Severino trying to come back from Tommy John. He had multiple setbacks, and, he's now behind Sale. The Mets had Noah Syndergaard. He had setbacks and had to slow it down. So, luckily with Sale, I know there were a few little bumps in the road at the beginning, a neck stiffness and back tightness and a case of COVID during the winter, but nothing involving the arm, nothing involving the mechanics. And so since pretty much the beginning of the regular season, since April or May, around there, it's been a very smooth go for him. They've decided to take him along very slowly because, they don't want to do something now that screws up 2022 and puts that in jeopardy. So, the Red Sox, it's been frustrating at times, I'm sure, for fans to see them taking it this slowly, but when he comes back full strength, no issues at all, they're going to be kind of rewarded for their patient track there.
I don't have any problem with them taking their time with him, given how many years does he have left on the contract? 3? I
think this is the first, or last year might've been 1, or so either 3 or 4. Yeah. You know what? 2020, I don't know if it it screwed up everybody else's timeline of things in the world, but it makes me not remember. But he's got through 2024 with a vesting option for 25.
Exactly. That's my point. The essential point is there's many more years left on his deal. And if the Red Sox think that he can be what he can be later in his career, which is still a very good top of the rotation ace, then you got to protect him now. I mean, look no further than Jacob deGrom in New York. Even he had a setback over the weekend. He's going to be probably pushed back for another month, and they may get him back, the Mets, in September, but they're not going to rush him. Point being is there's no point at this time to really rush a guy like Chris Sale, especially when you're the Red Sox, and you were swept over the weekend by Tampa Bay. You may not even win the division, but you're still in very good shape in terms of the playoffs. You're 6 games, 5.5, 6 games still ahead of the New York Yankees. You're in solid playoff position. There's no reason to panic at this point. Now, Chris, I mentioned, Kyle Schwarber, the addition of Kyle Schwarber. What are they going to do with him defensively? I mean, I heard him on the Sunday night broadcast, A-Rod and the ESPN team, and obviously they're speculating on how much pressure there is going to be on Alex Cora to fit him in defensively.
Right. It's not a clean fit. I think Chaim Bloom even alluded to this on Friday, talking to reporters saying, if we could have gone and gotten Anthony Rizzo or, somebody like, and he obviously didn't use the names, but Anthony Rizzo or Carlos Santana, a first baseman like that, who we could just plug in at first base, it would be a much cleaner fit. But Schwarber was the bat that we thought was an impact bat. He was the guy who was, worth the price we were willing to pay. And so, in the column I wrote Thursday night, right after the deal, around about 3 a.m., it's not the perfect fit, but it's a good problem to have, too many talented players that you're trying to fit in. They're going to try him at first base, which is a big ask, especially a guy coming off a hamstring injury, trying to teach him a new position on the fly as he rehabs. If not, he'll go to the outfield, and that'll mean, fewer at-bats for other guys, whether that means Jarren Duran maybe goes back down to AAA if his struggles continue, or Hunter Renfroe and Alex Verdugo get fewer at-bats, or Kike Hernandez plays more second base. There's going to be a lot of shuffling. We know Alex Cora likes doing that stuff anyway, so that'll be okay in his book. But, it's not a clean fit, but it's a problem the Red Sox are happy to have, and in a couple weeks, that'll be the case. Something important to remember is, if he's back, let's say around August 15th, the roster expands to 28 on September 1st. Not 40 like it used to, but still 28 players. So they'll have room to carry, whoever they want. It will come September 1st and mix and match on a daily basis and use the bench and all that type of stuff. So it'll be interesting. It's when the rumors first started on Thursday morning that they were talking about Schwarber, I was texting a couple other people on the beat, and kind of we dismissed it, just thinking, oh, he's not a fit. He only plays left field, and they have too many outfielders already. But it happened, and now they'll kind of piece it together as they go. So
does Kyle Schwarber make the play Bobby Dahlbeck made in the 8th inning Sunday night at Tampa Bay? I do not think he does. I mean, look, Bobby Dahlbeck has had his struggles at the plate. That is well documented, and we all know that he is pretty much hit or miss, all or nothing at the plate if you're talking Bobby Dahlbeck. But the play he made at first base on the chopper, the spinning cue ball shot down to Rafi Devers at third base and scooped that out of the dirt was a very special play, I thought, under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what we're going to get from Schwarber defensively. He's a guy that came up as a catcher, obviously, was there a little bit as a rookie with the Cubs, and since then, it's like 99.5% of the time he's played left field. So, it's going to be maybe at times an adventure, but the point is to get his bat in the lineup. We've seen what the Red Sox first basemen have done offensively this season. Like you said, Dahlbeck has been, other than a couple hot weeks here and there, pretty much in a slump all year. Danny Santana and Marwin Gonzalez, the guys they've tried out there, have been abysmal as well. We've seen Frankie Cordero come up and have a little bit of success here and there in the last couple of weeks, but the Red Sox needed to fill, they can't have a dead spot in their lineup every night. And so they definitely filled that. And come August 15th or so, when Schwarber's back, that will no longer be an issue.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see how Alex Cora, who I think has always been very underrated for the way he manipulates his lineup and fits the puzzle pieces in to make it certainly a productive offensive lineup.
Right.
But Offensively, I don't think he gets enough credit for his knowledge of the game and where to position people and put guys in position on the field to do the best job they can defensively, and that really helps their pitching staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we saw that in 2018. When they were at their best. On a daily basis, it was either Holt or Nunez at second, either Pierce or Moreland at first. A lot of those guys are very solid defensively. You look at a guy like Mitch Moreland, who was a Gold Glove candidate all the time. Steve Pierce was solid over there. He mixed and matched, and the luxury for the Red Sox is they have Kike Hernandez, who they can put in important defensive spots, and he's going to be one of the best defenders on the field. So I think they're happy with that. At times, like I said, we don't know what's going to happen at first base with Schwarber, but it's a risk they're willing to take.
Hansel Robles made his debut Sunday night at Tampa Bay. He's the right-hander they got at the deadline from the Twins for right-hander Alex Scherf, who went back to Minnesota, minor league pitcher. And then they also got left-handed pitcher Austin Davis from the Pirates. What do you think those two guys can contribute?
I think, if you're looking at from a Red Sox perspective, they're looking for interesting arms that weren't going to cost you much. Right. I'm sure they had talks with the Cubs about Craig Kimbrell, but you saw what they had to give up. Nick Madrigal, who was their starting second baseman already, who's hitting like 320 in 85 major league games, and he's out for the rest of this year, but is a guy who's under control forever, has track record of major league success. I mean, if you're trying to think of who the Red Sox would have to give up, for a guy like Kimbrell, it's a price they weren't willing to pay. So, and Alex Scherf, who's a guy who's had success this year, but a kind of a fringe prospect, and then Michael Chavis, who obviously was just a change of scenery candidate at this point, who had struggled in the last 2 years. The Red Sox didn't give up anything that they thought would meaningfully fit into their plans for the next few years, and in exchange got two arms that are not the sexiest, flashiest arms out in the trade market, but two guys that they think, okay, we can do something with the stuff, or we can put them in position to succeed. Robles has been around for a while. I think he has like 6 or 7 big league seasons with a few different teams, had some success in Anaheim, and is on is a rental. A guy in Davis who is controlled for a few more years. They needed a lefty because, they felt like with Josh Taylor and Darwinson Hernandez, they didn't have enough left-handed depth. Not the flashiest moves. Obviously, Schwarber was the big move, but those are the types of guys that they're rentals. They don't cost you much. You bring them into the bullpen and see what they can do. It's just another arm. The real cost is they lost Brandon Workman, who was pitching horribly. So, it's not a big risk, but there's potential payoffs when, you get the Red Sox and every other team like getting these guys in their labs, say, okay, we have the video on this guy. We think that if we, increase his changeup usage or drop his arm angle a little bit, then he'll become a stud for us in the bullpen. Every team thinks they're smarter than the rest in that regard. And so, we'll see if the Red Sox can do it with these two.
What's really important, Chris, I think, to Chaim Bloom and Red Sox ownership, Sam Kennedy and John Henry et al., is that they didn't have to disrupt what they were trying to do with the farm system. That is to rebuild it, right? I mean, build up the stock. Don't dip into it just to make some rental moves here at the trade deadline in 2021 and make sure everything, the key pieces are in place, right, to move forward. And they accomplished that, and they're still in great position to make some type of run in the last 2 months, and then, let the cards fall where they may in October. But the important part of this is that they didn't disrupt the true, blue chip prospects in their system that they're building up.
Right. And Aldo Ramirez, who is the 20-year-old pitcher that they gave up for Schwarber, he's a guy that had kind of risen up prospect rankings this year. But he, if you look at it, was not one of the top 5 or 6 pitching prospects in the system. And that's important, and so I think, you can give up a 20-year-old at low A who has 3 or 4 steps before coming to the majors and feel, better about that than, giving up a Tanner Houck, obviously, or giving up even a Brian Mata who's injured.
Yeah.
Right.
Either one of those moves, I think we both know. I think everybody knows who follows the Red Sox closely. That was never going to happen. Before we get back into more Red Sox, Chris, I want to ask you about what you're doing on Monday nights now. That might be of particular interest to young journalists trying to get into the field and do what both of us are doing.
Yeah, it's been a project that I've been doing for a long time now, almost a year. It's just kind of during the off season. Red Sox obviously weren't in the playoffs last year. COVID was still raging, not a lot going on. So I decided to start hosting a Zoom workshop for aspiring sports writers. I've had probably 6 or 7 sessions and in different formats here and there. But, the gist of it is a group session where we talk about different things in the industry, whether it's social media or how to write a feature or break news or do a podcast, all those types of things. And then in addition to that, a one-on-one session, and that's usually work review where, they'll send me kind of the work that they've done in the past and we go through it or edit it and look at the strengths and weaknesses of it. So, the best part for me is, and I've had, over 100 people of all ages come through it and trying to perfect their crafts. The best part is I've learned from them. So it's been really cool. The next one starts tonight, actually, on Monday night, and have a few people already signed up. So it's a cool little side project during baseball season and during the off season, just to meet a lot of cool new people. And I'm telling you, the people that have come through, and I always say it's aspiring sports writers, but they're all, a lot of them have already surpassed me and definitely talent level. So the future's bright.
Toughest question you've been asked during these sessions? Can you think of 1 or 2 questions that even stumped you?
Yeah, well, a lot of people ask if I could change, things about my career or change things about my path to this point, what would it be? What would I do? And I would say other than working with Chris Smith, I always say, not realizing earlier that, you have to really diversify your skill set early in your career to where, as and it's not just file one story a day. It's you do a podcast one day, you write a feature one day, you do an opinion column, and you're asked to do a lot of things, especially on a beat.
Versatility. It's really the essence of what we do now in this journalism industry. And without it, you're just going to be a one-trick pony. And we see how that works for a lot of athletes in sports, not only baseball. We see it across all major sports these days. You can't just do one thing. The more things you can do, the more valuable you are. The old Bill Belichick idiom that he always preaches to his players. It's true in journalism as well. Let's get back to the Red Sox and your takeaways from over the weekend, Chris. I thought the Sunday night game was a fabulous baseball game to watch. It was tight. It was close. It was between the top 2 teams in the AL East, and certainly you put the Astros in terms of their competitiveness right at the top of the American League. They have the best record, but in terms of the competitiveness and the rivalry between the Rays and the Red Sox over the last many years, I thought Sunday night was one of those classic games.
Yeah, and you don't always see primetime games at the Trop, so it's interesting to see the ESPN backdrop and Vic Sturgeon and A-Rod at Tropicana Field. You almost never ever see that. It's always Red Sox, Yankees, or whatever. But this is going to be a dogfight like we saw over the weekend. The Red Sox have actually played pretty well against the Rays so far this season before this weekend. And the last couple of years that had not been the case. The Rays came in, I think, last year in 2020, and they just brutalized the Red Sox in a 4-game sweep at Fenway. There was one game that was like 19-8 or something like that. Just a horrible afternoon matinee that kind of summed up the whole Red Sox season. This year, the teams are going at it. And it's obviously, not over. The Red Sox will welcome the Rays back in a week from tomorrow for 3 games at Fenway. And then they go back to the Trop for a 4-game set at the end of August. Then the Rays come back I think September 5th or 6th. So there's a lot of games left to be played between these 2 teams, which sets up for a very, very interesting race. The Red Sox are obviously playing a lot of divisional teams. They'll have a little break from that right now with, Detroit in the next 3 days, but they're going to have to beat. They're not going to have to sit and scoreboard watch, for the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months. It's, you're going against the guys you have to beat, and they better do it.
Yeah, and that's going to really dictate whether or not they, A, have a chance of winning the AL East, or B, worst case scenario, holding on to a playoff spot. I mean, I said earlier in this podcast that they're in very good shape. And, I think they're in position to really, if they play even average baseball down the stretch, they're 19 games over 500 still. If they played, let's say 5-6 games above 500, that puts them at 93, 94, maybe 95 wins. That should be good enough to get into the playoffs, you think? Yeah.
Well, and also considering I think everybody had them predicted for 500 or lower to start the season, I think they'll take that too. But yes, I think that range is probably going to be good enough. And, there is obviously the huge reward for winning the division. And we've seen that, time and time again, that wild card game. not just in terms of, hey, you have to face a sudden death game just to start the postseason, but it screws up, lining up your pitching for the beginning of the postseason as well. So that's something, they don't probably want to screw around with if they have, their choice. Obviously, they're going to win the division, get that spot in the ALDS to start. But, on the flip side, the Red Sox have never been in a wild card game. So it'd be something interesting, something new. I think, if the stakes weren't as high, I think fans would enjoy that a little bit more. But that would be something new for them.
I do think I'm still not a big fan of the wild card format. One game, go, win or lose, go home.
Mm-hmm.
I like the best 2 out of 3. That at least if you lose the one game in heartbreaking fashion, you can come back the next day. And that's the one thing about last year's playoff format I really did embrace. I hated the fact that everybody was in the bubble and in, stadiums. I don't like the bubble idea of sports anyway, but I did like the 2 out of 3. And I don't know if baseball will ever consider going to that long term. It'll be interesting to find out. But I want to ask you something. Erod, what does Alex Cora do with him coming down the stretch? Because right now, if you take a look at his numbers, they're not good, Chris. He's 7.6, 5.60 ERA. And his whip is all the way up to 1.41. That is not good for a guy that I think coming into the season, we assumed would be a top 3 pitcher in the rotation, and he's not close to that.
Right. You know what? The number that I always see, we're looking at Eduardo Rodriguez in this season, it is innings. And, at the beginning of the year, it didn't seem like he was going to be able to take on a full workload. They kept saying that, but it, wasn't certain. He's already at 100 innings as we sit here, with 2 months to go. And so I think if you told the Red Sox that at the beginning of the season, they would have been thrilled about it, especially after everything he went through last year. Now, that aside, he has not been good. This is a guy who finished 6th in the American League Cy Young voting in 2019, was poised for a big season last year, came in really good shape in spring training, and then obviously the myocarditis and COVID and everything ended up canceling that season for him. And at the beginning of the year, I think you could say, all right, maybe there's a little bit of rust, but in April he was actually really sharp, and since then has been where the struggles have come. I think Alex Cora and the pitching coaches have really thought in the last few outings that he has started to turn a corner, at least in terms of stuff. In the few outings before that start against the Yankees where he had the migraine symptoms, he was at least, starting to throw the ball better. The changeup was a little bit slower. There was more of a difference in velocity between his pitches. You look at the start, it started in the Bronx a couple weeks ago was very strong. It started in Oakland, 6 scoreless innings was really strong. So there were signs that he was starting to turn the corner. And then, 2 unfortunate outings on the last homestand. One, he just had a migraine, had to be taken out. And the second one, you don't know how his how things were disrupted for him in between starts. It kind of seems like, when you're taken out and if you're not sure that you're even going to make that next start, you probably can't go through your normal progression. So, for Erod, there's a lot on him, because the Red Sox are counting on, okay, maybe there's going to be some rust at the beginning. We've seen some rust here and there and some downturn from him, but now it's August and he's healthy. Migraine symptoms aside, he's healthy, and it's time for, the Red Sox really need him to turn the corner. So a big start coming up for him this week. I think they all are for him going forward, and the Red Sox need better performance. It's as simple as that.
I would not disagree with that. It's a big week coming up. I think the Red Sox, they absolutely have to take 2 of 3, if not sweep all 3 in Detroit, considering they have 4 games coming up in Toronto. And that will be back in Toronto, the Red Sox first trip there since 2019. Of course, the Blue Jays have returned back home. The Saturday situation was going to be 1 game, but it's now 2 games because one of those games in Florida, in Buffalo, was rained out. So they're going to have a 7-inning doubleheader on Saturday, 2 7-inning games. And then, of course, the Sunday afternoon game wraps up what has turned into a 10-game road trip. I'm fascinated to see what happens with the Red Sox north of the border against the Toronto team. Everybody keeps telling me, Chris, watch out for the Blue Jays. Watch out for the Blue Jays.
Right.
They crushed the Red Sox one night, and then the Red Sox come back and beat them up the next night. I just don't see the Blue Jays, who come into action this week in 4th place. They are now behind the Yankees by a game. They're 54-48. They can mash like nobody's business. I get that, but I just don't think the pitching is there.
Yeah, that's the thing. You look at their run differential, and the Rays are plus 112, Red Sox are plus 48. The Yankees are even run differential for the whole year, and Toronto's at plus 107, which has them in like the top 3 or 4 in the entire American League. I think, like you said, when their offense get going, they can put up 15 runs a night. We've seen that happen at Fenway 2 or 3 times this year. The blowout on that Sunday in June, the blowout the other night. I mean, it can happen, but the pitching isn't there. Luckily for them, they acquired, arguably the best non-Scherzer pitcher on the market last week. Jose Barrios going to the Jays, not just for the rest of this year, but for next year as well. That's a big addition, and he'll help. I think they need to add some more pitching over the winter to get themselves into real contention for next year. But they're dangerous. We've seen that time and time again throughout the season. The Red Sox have played pretty well against them, but you've seen, when they get going with the bats, those games are blowouts. And Toronto Rogers Center should be rocking this weekend after everything that's gone on. And luckily for the Red Sox, that'll be the last time they face the Jays for the entire year. So if they get hot down the stretch, it's not going to be the Red Sox problem, at least directly. But 4 big games, this is a big road trip. Did not start out the way the Red Sox needed it to or wanted it to. They need to beat up on the Tigers, like you said, and then hopefully. I always say with a doubleheader, you just want to split it and move on. But take 3 or 4, or at least split with the Blue Jays and come home on a good note before a big series against the Rays, and a series where you might have Chris Cotillo joining the team.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Chris. Thanks for hopping back in your old seat, if you will, and talking some Red Sox. I think it's going to be a fascinating, final 8 weeks of the season. And I think the Red Sox are going to hold on, but that's why they play the games. We'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank everybody for downloading today's podcast. Thank our terrific guest, Chris Cotillo, covering the Red Sox for MassLive.com. You can follow him on Twitter as well. You definitely should be doing that. All one word, ChrisCotillo. Chris, thanks again for joining us. For Chris Cotillo, I'm Mike Petraglia, and this has been the Red Sox Beat Podcast, powered by CLNS Media.